sophisticated attackers are targeting credentials to escalate privileges. Attivo Networks provides an innovative solution that finds, cleans, and monitors exposed credentials to reduce attack surfaces. Additionally, the solution alerts when attackers try accessing Active Directory objects while hiding data and derailing them with disinformation. Organizations can go one step further and hide real credentials among deceptive lures that lead attackers to decoys for recording TTPs and forensic evidence. Find out more at securityweekly.com/Attivo Networks and sign up for a free trial. Qualys has brought together vulnerability management and patch management, letting security teams discover vulnerabilities and apply patches immediately, all within a single, unified app. Sign up for a free trial of Qualys VMDR, vulnerability management, detection, and response today at securityweekly.com/Qualys. Do you have a specific guest or topic that you'd like us to cover on one of the upcoming shows? If so, submit your suggestions for guests by visiting securityweekly.com/guests. Complete the form, and we review those on a regular basis, and we'll get back to you. Welcome back to Paul's Security Weekly. This segment is sponsored by PlexTrack. To learn more, please visit securityweekly.com/PlexTrack. Joining us for this segment is the podcasting expert, Mr. Dan DeCloss. Dan, welcome.
Hey, thanks, Paul. Thanks, everybody. Good to be back.
You seem like so much more comfortable now on podcast, and for our listeners out there,
I'm all settled in. Got a mic.
That's it. So we, myself, Dan, and a bunch of other folks, recorded a 3-part podcast series that we're releasing. So make sure you go to securityweekly.com/PlexTrack. We'll put a link to it there and more information about it. But we did a 3-hour recording marathon session. It was awesome.
Yeah, it was fun. Yeah, I'm not going to lie. I enjoyed it.
We'll try and cover different content on this segment.
Sure.
We'll tease out a little bit of that content as well. And in this segment, we're going to talk about discussing effective assessments, the maturity of your security posture. When are you ready, right? That was the title for this. How tall do you need to be to ride the ride? When are you ready to do?
And see, I thought Santa Cangelo was coming.
Santa Cangelo kind of coined the term of like how tall they need to be to ride the ride. It was really to evaluate, vendor solutions, right?
Yep.
You can also apply the same logic to like, when am I ready for a vuln assessment, a red team, compliance, purple team, all those things. When am I ready? So Dan, take it away.
Yeah, I think that's it's a good question, and it's like, what's the progression of like the types of assessments that we should be doing in our environment for where we're at as a team, right? And as an organization, what maturity level? You hear a lot about how mature do we need to be in order to reach certain phases of different assessments. And I think it's an important thing to talk about in terms of what types of assessments should you start with as you're just getting off the ground versus if you're a well-oiled machine from a security team perspective, and what are the next types of assessments you can be doing or should be doing. And I definitely, you kind of meet people all across the spectrum in terms of, they've got a pretty mature program in terms of they have a lot of technology in place. They've got a lot of good processes in place, and they still will say, "Okay, we're not ready for a pen test. We can't have somebody coming in." And sometimes there's a fear factor there. I think,
but sometimes it's the other way around, because I've had conversations with the organization. I'm like, "So tell me about like your risk tolerance," and they're like, "What do you mean?" I'm like, "All right, well, tell me about your security policies," and they're like, "What do you mean?" And they're like, "Wait, shouldn't we have a pen test?" I'm like, no, not yet.
Yeah, it's like, I don't know that it's going to provide a lot of value, right? But I think it's important, and so I love the concept of how tall do you have to be, right? Just a side note, it reminds me of, we took our young son to Disneyland. This was several years ago now, but he was right at the edge of being tall enough to get on most of the rides.
Right.
So we just put a little bit of
cushion in the shoes. We've done that.
Just a little thicker shoes.
Because there's nothing worse as a parent to have an upset child because they can't ride the ride. That just ruins the day for everyone, not just you and your family, but anyone who's around. Right.
Right. Exactly.
Can lead to
but he made it
meltdown.
To the last one, right? And then by the end of the day, things had started to kind of
squish down.
Right? So
gravity's a thing.
that last ride, he just like went ballistic. We're like, well, bud, you made it through most of them. So
right.
Anyway, but so that's totally a side note. I was like, the title of the topic is fun.
Yeah, but it is kind of a thing, I think, with a lot of organizations that they want to believe they're ready for, let's say, a red team assessment, but they're more likely going to benefit better from a questionnaire and then take action based on those answers to the questionnaire, like have a vulnerability management and patching program first before you have someone come in and test the security of your organization. The questionnaire focused around, what technologies are you using, and what process and procedures do you have in place? Have you consolidated some of your technologies? If you haven't done any of that, you're likely, Dan, like you're not ready to do any assessment above and beyond probably that questionnaire, or more, Jeff, to kind of your specialty compliance-based assessment. But they still want to jump right into a red team because I don't know, that's what they talk to their friends about. I don't know why.
Yeah, I think there's that luster and appeal of a red team, pen test, those kinds of things. But what you hit it on the head in terms of having your processes in place first, right? When we talk about maturity of organizations, you can have all the technology in the world, in all the the hip next gen everything, and still really not have it be effective because you don't have the processes in place. You don't have the people to manage the tools and the platforms that you're using to assess these things. So that's largely shelfware at that point. So I think what's most important for folks to focus on early on is the process. Do we have the processes in place? Could we emulate everything that we need to do with pen and paper today? And then you can talk about what do we need to automate? What tools do we need to go buy?
Right.
But if you haven't done put the elbow grease into the process, you're going to be in for a long haul.
Yeah, how do you manage your privileged users? What do you mean manage? I just shoved people in domain admins. I never went back and looked at the list. That's Tyler and Larry are already laughing because they're like, whoa, wait.
Yeah, and to clarify, when you say having processes in place, to what degree do you mean they have to be written down, documented, published, people know where to find it, and not that they follow it line by line every time they do their job, but to what degree does you mean that they're written down? That's my question.
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I think from my experience, we've always recommended people do some form of like a wiki, or something that's at least loose enough to be able to put down notes and procedures. I don't think it's not a formal process if it's not written down, but you certainly can even just start with like, hey, this is how we're going to formalize the process. So I think, before you start talking about a penetration test, yeah, most of those processes I think should be in some kind of a written form, but I think, and you've probably seen this a lot, Jeff, in terms of, people will have what's written and then what's actually done. Right. So I think what's more important is making sure that what you do, what reality looks like in the day is actually what is reflected on the paper. And so those should be written in some capacity and in a loose fashion at first, right? So that you at least are starting to get into the mindset of like, if somebody leaves the organization, we know where to look to be able to continue to repeat these processes and have these things documented in some capacity. I wouldn't say you have to have like a super, well fleshed out documentation process before you could start advancing in the different types of assessments that you're going to conduct. But the documentation is important.
Yeah, but it can't just be the policy, right? It can't be, and Jeff and others, I'm sure you've seen this, where, we have a security policy. It says all our systems will be patched within 30 days. And then you go to the team and they're like, we have a policy? Wait, it says every 30 days?
30 days?
We're just trying to keep things running. We don't really have a process for that yet.
Well, and I would say I have seen mostly in my years of working with customers, primarily in the PCI world, more the net effect of not having documented processes. And guess what? PCI requires formal processes for pretty much everything that PCI requires, which is funny because people like to make fun of PCI as a checkbox exercise, but like 60% of PCI is, do you have something written on paper or
right.
digitize? And to me, the beauty of it always was, you come in and ask them, well, let's see everything. Let's see all the paperwork, your policies, your standards, procedures. That looks great. Now go show me that you're doing it. And of course, like you said, Paul, that's where it kind of all falls
Yeah,
apart.
it can fall down at that point.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think there are cases we have to.
Go ahead, Tyler.
I was going to say, I think there are cases where we do have to be aware that where there are many organizations that are not ready for a security assessment or a pen test or a red team for that matter, there are political things and business risk aspects that get pushed down from either not top-down buy-in, they need buy-in for security budget, they are the only one that thinks security is an issue. There are cases that we see quite often where, yeah, you do not have, like, the security guy gets it and you have an open dialogue with them, but the rest of the organization doesn't get that, and they need the impact of something that is shock and awe. And those are the cases where, yeah, that's kind of the purpose of the red team, is to come in. We know you're going to own them. They're not in a good spot, but you have to do that in certain cases. And that's not the way I'd like to do it. It's always better to start with, seeing where they're at, tailoring the assessment to their capabilities. But the sad truth is there is a lot of organizations that just do not have that capability or that buy-in or that maturity mindset yet. And so getting the mindset first in order to have that conversation, to have people and asset owners and budget owners sit down and be a part of that conversation, I think is step one.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the culture of the organization plays a large part in that, right? I mean, security budgets increase, substantially when they've been breached, and so I think, Tyler, we've experienced this in the past where sometimes the way to get a security budget is to do a covert pen test and show a webcam shot of the CEO or something, and then all of a sudden the light bulb goes off that, oh, you know what, we should do this, otherwise this could be a lot worse. So there's definitely those kinds of things, and I wouldn't say that that's necessarily a maturity discussion. That's a maturity discussion of, like, just getting the ball rolling with getting the resources you need to even just start your security program, or at least get it to a point where you really can be effective, right?
Jeff?
Well, you're actually touching on something that I wanted to ask as a sort of a point of clarification / pet peeve of mine. Asking the question, how tall do you need to be to ride the ride? What's your maturity level? Are you ready for a pen test? Implies that it happens later. And I would agree with that. It's all the way deep down in requirement 11 of the PCI standard. And it's really designed to, after you've done all the things, test it.
Is that 11? Is it 11.3 is the pen test?
Correct.
Oh, very good. I got something right. See, Jeff, I'm learning. It only took how many years?
I'm so proud.
Progress.
I'm so proud of
I think that means you need to drink.
Yes, I do.
And get me another ice cube.
Cheers.
But I hear people talking more often than is comfortable, and it seems to be a prevailing philosophy, if you will, within the industry, which, to be honest, is how I started in the private sector 25 years ago. You're plugging into the internet. You really should have a pen test to find out what you need to do, what your tools and weaknesses are. But I would like to think that we've moved on from that. So I hear people talking about how you start by having a pen test to see what all your problems are. And of course, the way a lot of pen tests are, it's just a technical test. It's the glorified vulnerability scan. It doesn't touch at all on what are all the things missing in your policies and your procedures and in your business operations. And I've had this conversation with Adrian. I think this is the first conversation I had when I met him, was like, if you know what you're doing as a security professional, even if call yourself a pen tester or not, you can have a half an hour conversation with a company and pretty much know what their problems are just by talking to them. Mm-hmm. And why not just do that rather than go through the cool, sexy, we had a pen test. When is the right time to have a pen test, and when, if ever, is a pen test appropriate to start the ball rolling on a security program? Your thoughts?
Yeah. So, I mean, I'll address that last part first. I think the kind of where we were talking before is using a penetration test to help identify some of the more severe risks that might help free up budget or free up some resources to get your get your executive staff thinking in the right direction. Certainly that's when I would recommend, like, yeah, let's do something like this to at least kind of have that pop and wow factor. If you've already got that, then I think it's important to, I think we've even talked about this on the show before, Paul, is about what's the right scope for the pen test. And that's really where it starts to come down to is, you can start early with pen testing if you're scoping it correctly. You're not going to, and have the expectations that this isn't going to be the broad sweeping, attack surface management type of a pen test where you're going to get extreme coverage on every single type of risk and vulnerability or vector that could get in. But it could be, hey, I want to actually, test some of the aspects of our lateral movement, protections. And that even starts to play into, where we're continuing to evolve as an industry with respect to purple team engagements, right? Being able to take small chunks of that puzzle and starting to piece them together with small assessments that actually you can measure and grow and show your progress over time. So I think that every organization might be a little bit different as to when they want to start doing that from a pen test perspective. But I think that there are ways to utilize pen testing, and it's not just meeting the PCI annual requirement. It's actually helping address some of those needs as the team continues to mature and grow. So I tend to always come back to the attack lifecycle and how do we measure our progress there as to what tactics and techniques attackers are going to be using in our environment. But again, having some of those processes already in place to be able to detect these things, knowing what we would be looking for. Do we have any kind of alerting mechanism to help us in the analysis phase, right?
I think one of the important pieces there too that really plays into getting an early pen test is the security and maturity or education or fundamental understanding of the offensive security space by whoever is having to do the defense. One of the prioritizations that should be happening inside of an offensive engagement by a red team or a good pen test company is helping you identify where to put your resources, time, and energy. You're a defender. Yeah, you may be a security practitioner and you may have an understanding of all the attacks, but your ability to identify and weigh risk of what the threat landscape is, what attackers are currently using, and how to prioritize those risks to build a good 2 to 5 year security roadmap becomes very difficult, especially, you know your org very well, you know your environment very well, but you may not know what to focus on and at what means to put something like, SMB signing into place. Is that going to actually mitigate all the risks for the vertical I'm in with all of the protections and mitigating factors that I currently have in place? So being able to identify those and have a strategic roadmap to kind of work on is a good argument to do that first and have that penetration test. And that's an open dialogue with your security company. If you don't have that communication and the test is not tailored towards you and built to your kind of maturity level and capability level, then yeah, that's not going to do you any good. But a good security firm will do that, and they will provide a good roadmap, and they will provide fundamental recommendations and remediations to act upon over the next 2 to 5 years that you can then build something on. And that's an education piece.
It's one of the things in my experience that you have to, and I don't want to place blame, but defining the goals before you start a test is big. And I think some of my experience definitely tailored the questions that I asked, because there was this one time on a pen test where I got in, I think it was the pen test where I had taken over the radio station. Yeah.
I remember you telling me about that one.
Yeah, but so I went into the test and I was wildly successful in the first couple of days. This was a week-long test. And midway through the test, the CISO pulls me into his office at the time, and he was like, yeah, you can't talk to the team anymore. You can't be working with the team anymore, because as you're finding stuff, they're furiously going in and trying to fix it and make sure you don't find anything else. And he's like, the goal of this test was not so much the technical processes of the test, but it was to highlight some of the political environment. And looking back, I would have been like, oh, it would have been nice to know that before the test started, right? But they were the customer, and I didn't ask the right questions, and it was a learning experience for everyone, right? So I think that, to a lot of the folks' points, how you use the test is very important, but also how you communicate what the goals should be before you start the test is probably the most important thing. Gauging their security maturity is a mutual exercise that requires, and Larry, Tyler, Jeff, right, you spend a lot of time with clients probably having these conversations, hopefully learning from some of my experiences and others, where you don't want to be midway through a test and then understand the goals of the test. That's way too late, right?
Yep. Yeah. One of the other things I learned too is that you don't want to be doing an overnight pen test and get root on some system at a ICS network and realize that you have to call the customer because I've already had 12 beers. And you probably weren't in much better shape.
Or worse yet, the team not realizing they had a pen test and they're calling for an international, cyber incident that's a different discussion. That's probably a different hour-long discussion.
Or you're having a cert advisory issued against you because the tenant forgot to notify the base.
And Tyler, what kind of masks should you wear on a red team? On a physical. The kind in the picture behind you, right?
Ones that have the permission slip printed on them, so that when people get close, they can read the permission slip right from your mask.
Yeah, not a bad guy.
Not the hacker.
I don't have a weapon.
but getting back to the focus on process, which I agree with, we've had conversations, I think on air, various episodes where I've asked Larry and Joff, and I don't know if Tyler's been in on any of these conversations, but I as somebody that has to very commonly and often review pen test reports to see if they meet the PCI requirement of 11.3, I wish that I would see more. Well, I wish I would see an actual pen test report and not just a vulnerability scan output. A. B, what I really wish and think more pen tests should be in terms of root cause and talks of, we found all these problems, but in terms of root cause and what the real problem is, talk about the process that isn't in place that is, causing that systems are out there with misconfigurations or causing or allowing people to use, weak or default passwords, all the reasons why we drink. I think Larry and Joff have said that they do try to put that into their reports. I've never had to read one. I've never had the honor of reading one of their reports. I just don't see that very often, if at all, that truly capturing here's what your problem is, which again, you can probably tell the customer just sitting down with them for an hour or two and just talking shop, with their admins and with the security staff and so on and so forth. That's my experience.
Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of the findings that typically come out of a pen test report really could be extrapolated into, or abstracted into a few like projects, right? Like here are some of the projects that really result or are the root cause of why you have a lot of these issues. Like, hey, you've got some system configuration management issues, right? So let's find like a STIG, right, to really start implementing across your environment. That can help with a lot of these problems. Yeah, and so I agree. I think some of the better firms are actually going to do that, and so picking the right firm is and the right partner is an important piece to that puzzle.
But Dan, to Jeff's point, like making sure the organization has good teamwork and communications, probably step one, right? And we mentioned Michael Santarcangelo. That's largely what he does, right? Is coach people on those communication and teamwork issues. I think that has to exist as the first thing. You have to have a team that's willing to work together with management and go, yeah, we're admitting you have a problem as the first step, I think. But identify those. Then I think you're ready to start moving forward, right? And your product PlexTrack gives you that foundation, provided that communication and teamwork is set in motion. And Jeff, I think some of what you might be experiencing is tests that are producing the technical results, but kind of ignoring the fact that there are systemic communication and teamwork problems that could be, in a lot of cases, the fundamental problem as to why security is not getting done in the organization.
Well, you're effectively defining process, because there are always process problems or lack of process problems. I wanted to mention, though, that you may not be aware that the little research project that I did with the MITRE ATT&CK framework. That I've done a couple of presentations. I don't know if you're aware of that, Dan.
I am.
Okay, well, to your point of, all the findings would boil down to a few projects, for those companies that are like latching onto, well, let's pen test a red team according to the MITRE ATT&CK framework and let's see how we do. And my hunch that, okay, PCI probably addresses all of these things in one way, shape, or form. I was astonished to find that one single requirement addressed, or has the potential of addressing, in terms of mitigations of all the things that are in the MITRE ATT&CK framework. One PCI requirement addresses 30% of the MITRE attacks.
Is that 11.3? No, that's the only one I know. So I gotta go with the one I know.
We're talking. No, that's a good guess. It's gosh, you're putting me on the spot now. It is 2.2, and that requirement is develop configuration standards for all your systems.
Yeah.
I mean, it's funny how, I've been in the space a long time, 15 plus years now. And that's where I started. I started in the DoD.
That's not a long time.
STIGs.
Some of us.
Some of us. I didn't want to say it. But, I've been what's sad is like half my team or more are younger than I am now. Right. So I'm starting to feel on the other side here, but, that's where I started. I started applying STIGs to systems all across our agency. Right. So, we're still in that mode. And I think that doesn't get communicated very well through some of these assessments, right? And that's an important process to start putting in place early. And Tenable has the compliance checks. There's lots of ways to be able to do this, but you're exactly right, Jeff. A large part of the ways that people like Larry and Tyler can do what they do is simply because there's just a lack of secure configuration. Now there's always going to be the cases where you can't apply certain configs, right? But from the technical side, that's a large part of it. And there's things that a pen test is not necessarily going to be able to solve. Well, I guess it's not going to solve anything anyways, but when you have like communication breakdowns within your organization and are not able to effectively collaborate, that's another process issue and that's another culture issue. And so I think,
but also it could be a technology issue, Dan, and something you and I have spoken about in relation to the talent shortage. And I think the kind of parallels between the podcast automation software that we built and your product are pretty staggering, in that even if you have a good process and good communication, the technology that you're using to implement that process and have that communication, if it's disparate and not in full support of your process, it can fall down. If we're still relying on email and spreadsheets and people using a ticketing system incorrectly for what it's not intended to do, and granted, that's better than not having a process, right? So we're moving a little higher on the maturity curve. But I think once you're at that point, there's so many organizations and teams that don't have the proper technology supporting their processes. And like I said, if you're emailing spreadsheets around, using email for everything, even using Slack incorrectly, or all these different technologies, those have to support your processes, right? They can't define your requirements. Your requirements have to define in your technology that you're implementing, but that's a huge piece of it, right?
Yeah, the automation and the frameworks really, should remove the friction that you have, without it, right?
Now, Dan, be careful with automation, because I find I get a negative reaction when I use the word automation.
Sure.
What I tend to use, feel free to use this in your marketing and sales, right, is improve your workflow, right? Like you've got the process, you've got good process, good communication. You don't necessarily want to automate it, because that kind of scares people a little bit, but I want to improve your workflow. Now people start to understand that technology is helping me, not trying to replace something that requires a human, right?
Sure.
Automatically
Yeah,
improve your workflow.
Yeah, it's automatically improve your workflow.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think you're right. Is that, we have you may have a good process in place and having a good culture for communication. Just you have a lot of friction in how you do that, right? So being able to centralize those workflows, centralize the communication and collaboration, only continues to speed up the process. And when you talk about quote unquote automation, which has been a big topic in our space for a long time, right? But what does that really mean? And really, at the end of the day, you hit it on the head. Is it's actually you're trying to find ways to get time back.
Yeah,
right?
it's workflow efficiency, right?
Exactly.
Making people more efficient.
In our space, there's nothing more exacerbated than the talent shortage because of time, right? I mean, it's like, we have a talent shortage. So therefore, the lack of time that we have is even more. It continues to exacerbate the problem, is what I'm trying to say, right? And so the more time that you get back in your current processes, the better, as long as you're utilizing that time correctly, right?
But I feel like we're in an unfair advantage. Those of us that are 15 years or more in, and maybe have picked up a programming language or two, it comes almost second nature for us. For many of us to go, I can write a script to help me automate that part of my workflow. And I think sometimes we erroneously assume that everyone works that way, and that's not the case. That we have to provide the kind of workflow automation to others across the multiple teams.
Yeah, exactly.
I feel like that's what your product does. In one of the things it does really well.
Yeah. Our goal is to help everybody, in any portion of the security team to really stay focused on their work, getting their work done, and being able to communicate and collaborate effectively with the other teams. And so that's really what Plextrac's goal and mission is to keep remove the friction from all of these workflows in order to be able to continue to move the needle forward, from the security posture, from your assessment program. And that's the ultimate goal.
And I feel like we used to make jokes about it. Like I used to have the T-shirt or the mug that said I'll replace you with a very small shell script. But like that was a joke. But I'm like, no, like that's really like when you're I was a Unix admin, right? And many of us have held positions like that in the past. Like that was really the goal, was to automate things with a small shell script. Like that was a win every single day if we could do that.
Oh, sure. Yeah. And you see it in the SOC world, right? And you see it in the pen testing world. Like if I'm not, how many people remember all the Nmap flags that you need to, off the top of your head, right?
That's
that's stuff we automated all the time.
Well, and that's what GitHub's for. Because once you get beyond I want to like put a shell script around running this command, what I'm realizing today that I think is absolutely phenomenal is now there's, for any given task that we might have done, not only can we automate the flags to Nmap, but we can find 3 open source projects that have put like a full wrapper and maybe 3 different frameworks that like completely automates it with a web interface and the whole thing. Like we're really, I tell my kids this all the time, like you're spoiled. Like I wasn't able to go to Google and then watch a YouTube video that told me exactly how to fix my problem. Like I had to read the manual and figure it out on my own.
Or more importantly, I had to go to the library
to get a book and read the book about how to
hard catalog with a Dewey Decimal System to find that book.
Yeah. I think one important thing on the scripting side is that you can get in danger of not really understanding what's going on right under the hood. Kind of like your math teacher used to tell you, like, hey, don't just rely on the calculator.
Show your work. You got to be able to show your work first. I'm a huge believer in that, Dan. Yes.
Yeah. But you're right. I mean, kids these days have it easy, right? We had to write all our own stuff, right?
Jeff, did you also say that back in the day? Is it just like a thing that everyone says, regardless of the point in time? That, like,
When I was 20,
today have it easy. Like, were you saying that like 20 plus years ago? Like kids today?
No, I'm just trying to be like my dad, right?
There was a point when I was a dad, when my son became a teenager, and I caught myself saying something to him, and he's like, "Shit, I gotta go call my dad and apologize." Right?
Yeah.
There was also the time with my son. I came home from work, and my son met me at the door saying, "Dad, the TV's broken." So I walked over and I turned the TV on, and I'm pushing the buttons to change the channels. I said, "It seems to be working fine, son." And he picks up the remote and starts pushing the buttons. It's like, "No, it's broken. It's not working." And that's where I said, son, back in my day, I had to walk 10 miles uphill in the snow
Just
to
to
walk
change the
over to the
channel.
TV
Yeah.
to spin a dial.
Yes, I remember those.
And the dial was broken off, so we had to use pliers.
pliers, yeah.
Or sometimes a screwdriver, depending on.
If it didn't come in, you had to adjust the tinfoil around the rabbit ears.
What, you had tinfoil? I had to stand there like
stand
this.
there. Your dad used to make you stand there to watch the game, right?
My grandfather had this really cool box that you spun the dial, and it would actually turn.
We had one of those when I was growing
And
up.
he lived in a row house, and I used to try to spin the dial and then try to run out the back of the house and
see
into the backyard
Yeah.
far enough to get to a point where I could actually see it moving.
Yeah.
It was it's what made me so fast. An Olympic athlete.
See, I used to have to stand there like that.
Yeah.
We didn't have the tinfoil because my dad was too busy spending his money on a 200-foot tower that he put up in the backyard.
Right.
And put the TV antenna on top of that.
Nice.
You couldn't get out there fast enough to see it.
I don't know how we got here, but we did. I'm glad we did.
Get off my
actually.
lawn!
Yeah. Strolled on
And
memory
back
lane.
in my day, we knew how we got places.
But yeah, I think we, talking about automation and maturity and things like that. I think what it kind of where we've narrowed it down to is like, one, get some good processes in place. Find a partner if you don't have in-house talent to really help you hone in some of those early processes, and find somebody that's going to help grow with you.
Yeah, but then also to your point of understanding how it works. What I've also done, like knowing what your process is super important. And I find you often can't just jump to like having a good process and having technology that implements it. You almost have to do the analog, which is why I love whiteboards. Like sometimes I'm like, I think we know what the process is now, but let's get the whiteboard out and we're going to use that. And now we know our processes sound. Now let's go get the technology to help with those workflow improvements and workflow automation.
Exactly. Don't let the technology drive how you're going to implement your process, right?
Yeah.
Let your process implement how you're going to go about getting the technology, right? And that'll help drive what technology you invest in next, right?
Yeah, it was
because otherwise,
the Phoenix project did a great job of that when they had the whiteboard with all the sticky notes, right? Well, I feel like that was a good exercise to show just how much work it is and how it can be analog, much to our antenna examples from when we're growing up, right? You have to kind of see how that's going to play out before you can have these efficiencies, which speaks to where you are in your maturity. If you don't have any processes and you haven't had those whiteboard sessions and done it in an analog manner, I mean, you're not going to appreciate the workflow automations, but also you're not going to know how to implement them, right?
Right. Yeah. I think documenting that stuff is exactly where you start, right? It's like, hey, this is if this happens in our environment, what do we do, right? And let's talk through that before you say, oh, we need to go get a SIM to that's going to solve all our problems, right? Then you're just going to end up, like I said, kind of earlier on the show, you're just going to end up with a lot of shelfware and no real effectiveness coming out of the investments that you're making. And then I think you were talking on the first segment around how do we know what we've been investing in works, right? So that's an important piece, and I think often gets overlooked as we talk to folks about growing their program, maturing their organization from a security perspective, and knowing which technology investments to make first on the security side.
And I think this all helps the conversation we've had to know and listen to the series we created, which starts with focusing on purple team, red team, and the blue team, right? Because we really dug deep into all three of those areas. And specifically when it comes to assessments, the red team and purple team. So Dan and Tyler, I know you appeared on one of those episodes as well. Because maybe just at a high level kind of tease out what we talked about there and why people should listen.
Yeah, no, I mean, it was great. It was great discussion on all three episodes. From the blue team side, we really talked about what does it look like to get the real work done in the blue team, right?
And that was the goal of the series, getting the real work done.
The whole series is what does the real work look like in all three of these components of your security program. And I think we also highlighted on the purple team side that you can start early. You can start doing that internally.
And I just want to say we had Bryson Bort from Scythe on that, and his beard, it's just epic.
Oh yeah, you're in for a treat for sure.
You have to tune in the video of that just for Bryson's beard, because it is his spirit animal for sure.
Right. Yeah.
He's gone totally Moses.
Yes.
Yeah.
After coming down from whatever it was, Mount Ararat.
Was it Mount Ararat?
So on the purple team side, just knowing you can start those things early on, and don't have to have an external, pay a lot of money for an external firm to come in and do that for you. There's a lot of frameworks out there, selfless plug for PlexTrack, but being able to start standardizing your processes through a platform like PlexTrack, and being able to get those processes implemented early and often and documented, right? I mean, it serves as that documentation capability as well. And then Tyler, I'll let you talk about kind of what some of the goals for the red team of getting the real work done, but it was a really good segment.
I mean, being able to have that collaborative platform to interact just with the blue team and have the blue team available to read something outside of just a document that's delivered, some kind of dynamic and back and forth place, is a huge step in the right direction. That's something I've been like, why are we still writing documents that get printed off and no one reads or gets lost in a file share somewhere? Like, where are the dynamic content, the interaction, the ability to put your red team to work for you? Like, if you have questions afterwards, if you have questions where you're going, if we're trying to highlight something that may have come up while we're doing the engagement, is there an area we're focusing on that doesn't have any meaning from your standpoint? Like, that dialogue and that collaboration to do that. And then from the red team standpoint, just being able to do the technical work and then not wasting any more time than you absolutely have to on the minutiae of reporting. We've said it 100 times on here. Most of us feel like we get paid to write reports because I would do this job for free. I would hack all day for free. That's what I like to do. I hate writing reports. I mean, we have to get very good at technical writing. We have to get very good at Word and formatting and knowing why there's a carriage return and an extra space after the bullet and all the stuff that really doesn't matter. That's kind of where PlexTrack is taking some of the old school time wasting pieces of something that is very important. This may be the only lasting legacy that is left behind of whatever you did at that snap point in time for an organization, but really providing the blue team with that and taking all the time and putting it back into the assessment that you'd be wasting to write reports, and then having something that you can have metrics on that you can go back to from a blue standpoint, prioritize, and have a good workflow to kind of document and keep track of all of the things that were in a report, so it doesn't just get lost in a file share in a Word doc or a PDF that's never going to get printed or read again.
Yeah, exactly. And being able to have year over year comparisons, things that you would hope, people do get visibility into from their any kind of assessment really, but specifically on the red team side, a pen test, or a deeper red team exercise. So that's our goal, right? Is to streamline those processes, to help in all the workflows from all the security teams, right? We have an assessments module for the GRC, and framework based assessments. And I think one thing, just kind of as a side note to highlight to Jeff there too, is that most of the frameworks, end up landing on a lot of this comes down to process, right? Most of the frameworks have those fundamentals as these are the key building blocks to building a really good security program.
Don't forget run books and how that can facilitate processes and procedures and provide a good framework of documentation to do certain activities.
Yeah, exactly. No, thanks. Good plug, Tyler. Thanks. No, you're exactly right. I mean, our we have a runbooks module within PlexTrack that actually can serve as that documentation for how you conduct assessments. Every assessment that you're going to do, and you can add to it and modify it. So it starts to serve as your knowledge base too. Of these are the procedures that we're consistently testing, and the more you have that documented, the quicker you're going to grow because you already have that training capability documented for your next assessment, for whoever's coming on board as your next tester. It doesn't have to live in the heads of everybody anymore.
I'm excited for the release of the podcast series, which will be coming up very soon. you can find more at securityweekly.com/PlexTrack. We'll be announcing it there. Dan, thank you so much for appearing on Paul Security Weekly.
Yeah, thank you guys. Always good to be here.
With that, we'll take a short break, come back, talk about the security news, and why privacy is like bubble wrap. Stay tuned.